universe keeps pushing us together.
The universe keeps pulling us apart.
Tandy and Tyrone are finally face to face trying to figure out what the hell is going on. So let's break down episode 4 of Marvel's Cloak and Dagger right here on What Happened. What's going on, you lovely people? Lisa here, and welcome back to another episode of What Happened. This time I'm talking all about Cloak and Dagger episode 4 titled Call and Response. Now in this episode, we actually get more of New Orleans and its culture as a character, thanks to Tyrone's dad, Otis. And this episode also tackles some tough subjects like suicide as well. I just have to say, I love getting to see Tandy and Tyrone finally together, and yes, there's flirting going on in these scenes, but I actually really like that they're not rushing into any type of romance scenario with these two characters. They're letting them grow as individuals so that we can get to know them as individuals, and they're also trying to get to know their powers, and eventually they will team up, and they know that they're drawn to each other or torn apart from each other depending on what the universe is feeling like. But I love that the romance nail in the coffin is not in the mix yet. Yes, I know in the comics that these two were lovers and not only partners in the fighting crime sense, but partners in life as well as the romantic sense. But for this show, I actually like that they're not rushing into this, because sometimes teen dramas, the romance just gets to be too much and it's just gonna overpower, I think. So slow burn for that, slow burn for that. I'm now excited to see just how the season will progress, but first we gotta break down this episode, so let's get it started.
I think we need to talk.
We pick up this episode right where we left off, with Tyrone in the abandoned church where Tandy stays, saying we need to talk. They discuss their powers that each possess, what they learned from each other's visions, Tandy seeing Tyrone's hopes and Tyrone seeing Tandy's fears, and open up about each other's past when it comes to, Billy and Tandy's dad. They actually really begin to understand each other, confide in each other, and they seem relieved that they have someone that is going through the same changes as them. They also kind of start to realize that they gotta do that last thing that was in each of their visions, change the outcome. Otherwise, they're just going to be stuck in this cycle. As they continue to discuss each other's visions and feelings, talks about, Tyrone picking up that Tandy kind of has this death wish, and all of this happens, and Tandy realizing she, wishes she had died instead of her dad, and basically these two are suffering survivor's guilt. They also end up testing each other to see just how close they can get to each other before their powers fully kick in, or as Tandy says, triggers their crazy. And they actually get pretty close to touching, but they don't fully touch before they get flung across the room. By the end of the conversation, though, things take a quick 180 turn towards the bad as they start going at each other's throats and talking about, things like race and privilege and all of this stuff, and it gets so heated that Tyrone actually says some pretty bad stuff. He tells Tandy maybe she should go kill herself, and yeah, Tyrone ends up storming out while Tandy resorts to snorting some pills to try to, fix things and drown out the pain and what's going on. We then see how another day goes for Tandy and Tyrone. For Tyrone, Tandy informed him that he kept committing suicide basically by cop in the vision, and that he has to change things, and actually maybe he should get to know the cop. And since she's such a good con woman, she kind of just gives him a bunch of advice about how she stole his wallet. You gotta construct this narrative, and that he could totally do it. So Tyrone sets off to construct his own narrative, and he goes through this whole ordeal to make it look like someone stole his bike. But when he gets to the police station and sits and waits for the cop to get a pen to write down, his statement, he gets spooked and he ends up running out of the police station. Tyrone continues to be moody and is pissing both of his parents off, and after his dad finds the bolt cutters in his bag, you can see how closely Tyrone's dad, Otis, is, trying to bite his tongue so he doesn't whoop that boy's behind and rip the door off his bedroom. Instead, Otis channels all his anger and ends up dragging Tyrone to a neighborhood, basically the opposite of their current one. In the yard, we see a bunch of guys eating and playing music, and it seems like Otis has never shared much about his past with Tyrone, because Tyrone's just standing there looking confused AF. And we learn that these guys are a group called the Wild Red Hawks, who are a tribe of Mardi Gras Indians. And while the show does explain some about, what a spy boy role is and the regalia and beadwork, if you have a moment, actually go do some Google research on it. Just do a quick Google search, take a couple minutes, read about it, because I think it's really interesting, and I'm not going to be good at explaining it because I'm not an expert and I wasn't familiar with it. So if this piques your interest when you're watching the show, just do a 5-minute Google search. I think you'll be actually pretty intrigued about this whole thing. In short though, when it comes to the suits and the regalia that they wear for Mardi Gras Indians, they always involve intricate beadwork that Otis explains requires great skill and patience and control. And Otis tells Tyrone that if he can't control himself, even when it comes to like bead type stuff, he's not going to be able to control himself in the world. The regalia actually helps them find the control and strength they need. Tyrone then goes browsing through a room of failed regalia and pulls a cloak off a rack. And when his dad sees what he chose, Otis is kind of freaked out and is like, no, go put that back. Why would you pick that one? And Tyrone's just like, you told me this was a room of failures. This cloak spoke to me. And it's kind of like, oh, well, why did this cloak speak to you? Well, we learned it was Billy's cloak. Yeah, Tyrone's brother's that he never got to finish. So Tyrone's like, you know what? I'm going to take up this mantle. I am going to finish this beadwork, and it's going to be perfect, and it's going to be for Billy. And yes, as you guessed, this is our first little glimpse into Cloak's suit, and I think it actually looks pretty awesome from the tiny glimpse that we see right now, but I'm curious as to what, the rest of his full suit will look like, especially with the beadwork when it's done, and what Tandy's costume's actually going to look like too. And I don't know if we're going to get to see these two in their full get-ups by the end of the season, but I'm excited to see what kind of new spin they put on them. Back to the show. The trip was a really good bonding experience for Tyrone and Otis, and the next morning, both of their attitudes are different as Otis is telling past stories to Tyrone about the Mardi Gras Indians, and Tyrone actually cooked breakfast. And, the mom is just standing there looking so confused, like, wait, where is my family and who are these imposters? I honestly just love that the parents are now getting more worked into the show and aren't just, side character parents that are like, hey, honey, you doing okay? Breakfast is ready, and then they, disappear and you never see them again. Feeling inspired and with a new pep in his step now, Tyrone goes back to the police station, and this time he says he wants to speak directly to Detective O'Reilly. So it's going to be interesting to see just what Tyrone wants to talk to her about. It seems like Tandy must have mentioned O'Reilly to him during their talks, and how O'Reilly is sort of, at least for now, seems like one of the good guys. So hopefully she can help Tyrone with whatever thing he wants her to help her with. Now moving on to Tandy. She heads to her mom's trailer bringing a peace offering. A cup of coffee that her mom immediately boozes up. Tandy has decided she's done running, at least for now, and she asks Melissa about the whole Roxxon case, and Melissa explains that Tandy's dad was like the best guy and he ended up becoming a scapegoat for a greedy corporation. And she basically doesn't want the money, although actually she kind of does, from Roxxon, but she more importantly wants to clear Tandy's dad's name. And she really believes that Greg can help, but once again, Tandy's pretty skeptical of Greg and doesn't think he's any different from the past douchebags that Melissa's hooked up with. And just like clockwork, Greg shows up with groceries. Now, as Greg is making dinner, Tandy is sitting there totally judging him, trying to get a gauge on who he is. And it honestly seems like this Greg dude is actually a nice guy. Tandy decides to test this though by pretending to help cut up some pepper so she can use her new powers. She brushes her hand against his and actually sees his hopes. And it seems like Greg is true to what he says about liking Melissa and that he actually wants these three to be a family and he's gonna stick around. We end up seeing Tandy's attitude change, and it changes so much that she actually goes to Greg's office and offers to help him with the Roxxon case, mainly because I think she also just wants to learn about what she can to help her dad as well. Greg doesn't have a ton on Roxxon, but he says he's got a good start and he knows that these guys are leaving a paper trail and are basically super shady. Tandy then talks to Greg about his wife and he says they're pretty much done, they're just waiting on the paperwork, and Greg reassures Tandy that he really does care for Melissa. Things take a turn though when during dinner Greg's wife calls, and instead of ignoring the call or letting it ring on silent, he just lets it sit and buzz on the table. Yeah, bad mistake, dude. And this drives Melissa up the wall, so much so that they get into an argument and she just tells him to get the phone. It causes a fight and Melissa ends up excusing herself from dinner. Later that night before leaving, Tandy checks in with Melissa and she's like, you know what? I was wrong about Greg. And Melissa's like, no, you actually weren't. And she reveals that she broke up with Greg, so Tandy doesn't have to worry about him anymore. Tandy then goes back to Greg's office, and from across the street, she sees a woman posing as a water delivery person shoot Greg straight in the head and burn down the office. Yeah, Roxxon must know that he is up to something or maybe hot on their trail, so they're like, you gotta nip this in the bud. This shakes up Tandy and she returns to the trailer to overhear her mom on the phone leaving Greg a bunch of voicemails about how sorry she is, how she wants to try again, and this just breaks Tandy's heart because her mom finally found an actual nice guy who was actually also helping, and now he's gone, and this is like the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, as we see Tandy decide to carry through with what she talked about with Tyrone, killing herself. Yeah, like I said, this show does not shy away from some tough issues. Tandy then goes to the dock and chains herself up and jumps into the water, hoping to just drown herself and all her problems will go away because, well, she'll be dead. But like Tyrone said, it seems like their powers pop out when they don't want them to protect them. And we see light glowing up from the water, and Tandy ends up with a light dagger in her hand and cutting herself free. So now, with another new outlook on life, Tandy marches right back to Greg's office, cuts open the safe that she saw him put stuff in, and takes the files. Now, it's a good thing he was a smart enough lawyer to have a fireproof safe, but kind of dumb of that hit woman to not realize to look for a safe. But now it looks like Tandy's going to continue Greg's work, so after everything, Tyrone and Tandy have at least finally learned something from each other, that they have to change the solutions, that they can't keep going in the cycle that they have, and they gotta learn how to fix things in a different way. And well, that wraps up the main events of this week's episode. Like I said, Tandy and Tyrone finally confiding in each other, but they left things on a pretty sour note. So hopefully these two can run back to each other in the next episode and be like, you know what, I'm sorry, you were right, and now they can help each other work through their issues and the big problems that they have. I'm glad we also got to learn more about Tyrone's dad, but I really need to know more about Tyrone's mom and what she's up to and why the heck she is working with Roxxon Corp and trying to make them look good. Like, doesn't she know these people are kind of shady, so why do this? Now, in my original review, I did say that I thought the first 4 episodes were pretty slow, not necessarily boring, just slow. But you know what? We're done with these overall 4 episodes, and I think we've pretty much set up the majority of our characters. So now I think the show will finally really start kicking into gear and finding its groove, and I am excited for that. Obviously, we still have a few characters that have slightly been mentioned that haven't been given a lot of screen time, like Father Delgado, who definitely, it was mentioned he's got some skeletons in his closet, or he's got some demons he's working through. We have Detective O'Reilly, who we've seen in and out. If you know the comics, you know her arc in the comics, so it'll be interesting to see if that's how they go with the character in this show and when exactly they'll do that. I feel like they won't do that for quite a while since it's called Cloak and Dagger. They won't establish that first. But we also have Liam, who it seems like Tandy's just left sitting, rotting in jail, which is kind of a crappy thing to do to someone who's like your partner in all senses of the word at the moment. So hopefully he'll be back, right? He's a series regular, I think, so he's got to come back. For now, though, let's take a look at the promo for the next episode.
What are you doing with all this Roxxon stuff?
Doing some digging?
When you say dig, do you mean root around in people's heads?
Why not use it?
Leave the police work to the police. I don't need someone going off and being a hero.
I know who you are.
I wasn't ready before, but I am now.
Ah yes, the powers seem like they're actually starting to come into play now, and I feel like it's pretty realistic for someone, especially a teenager, discovering they have powers, to test the limits of those powers and even use them irresponsibly. So I'm excited to see just what Tandy does with her new powers, and even Tyrone. But guys, that wraps up this week's Cloak and Dagger recap. Let me know what you thought about this week's episode, and what do you think Tandy and Tyrone will do now that they have, each have a new outlook on life, and what do you want to see happen with them the rest of the season? Which character do you actually want to see more of? Hit me up in the comments to let me know what you think, and then right after that you can click right over here to check out some more of my videos. I got some things you didn't know about Camp Rock, or you can see Dylan O'Brien's hilarious return to YouTube after 8 years. If you do like what you see, though, hit that thumbs up, subscribe. My name's Lisa, and we'll be talking about what happened again very, very soon.